have led us all. Okay. I guess I started a little bit early. Okay. So I guess over the last 20 months, I'm sure that we have all had to learn ways to continue to do our jobs, right? You know, we've had to be more resilient. We've had to be more creative in order to keep our operations moving forward. And the FAS compliance reviews are no different. We had to make a lot of changes. And since March of 2020, the compliance review team has actually performed all of our compliance reviews remotely and electronically. Performing remote compliance reviews was definitely a significant change, not only for my team with FAS, but for all participants that we reviewed during the last 20 months. I mean, after all, when you think about it, what is the mantra that we've been singing forever? Hey, the documentation has to be hard copy, right? It's a hard copy process. It can't be electronic. Well, you know, we kind of got pushed into the 21st century finally by the pandemic. The only way that we could perform these reviews was to do them remotely. And the same, I'm sure, applies for a lot of aspects of your businesses, right? You had to find a way to do it electronically and remotely, and that's part of why we're here. And during that process, you know, what seemed very daunting at the beginning, or maybe even impossible at the beginning, is an opportunity for us to be more efficient moving forward. And we actually found some ways that we can make things better, right? Do it quicker, be more efficient. So that's kind of part of why we're here. So converting to performing compliance reviews remotely, as I mentioned, was definitely a significant change. And as always, our mission, not only FAS's mission, but your own with these companies that you're going to be hearing from today, we found a way to make it work. And these remote reviews do work, and they work well, very well. In time, you know, things have progressed. We've learned some lessons from the very beginning. Sure, there were a couple of stumbles or challenges when we first started doing compliance reviews in the spring of 2020. However, what feedback we've received is that once you get through that first compliance review that's done remotely, you're never going to want to look back. So I would imagine that some of that probably has something to do with the number of findings that you may have on that review. But putting that aside, the process has been working out great. And a lot of the participants actually prefer the remote review process once they get to the habit of handling things electronically. So as we were performing these reviews electronically, Kendra and I, you know, we've had some internal discussions about things, started to identify the benefits for FAS and for the compliance team. And we decided to hold listening sessions with a small group of participants, one-on-one meetings with them, to learn and find out how the remote review process worked for them and any suggestions that they may have for us to consider if we did want to continue doing remote reviews indefinitely on some level. So we were very fortunate. We wound up having 5 meetings with 6 groups, 2 of which were the USDA Dry Pea and Lentil Council and the American Peanut Council. The feedback that we received from all of the participants that we met with about remote compliance reviews were extremely positive. And the interest in continuing remote reviews on some level was actually overwhelmingly enthusiastic, more so than we actually anticipated. So enthusiastic, in fact, that in addition to performing compliance reviews remotely in fiscal year 22, which we've already committed to, we're actually starting to plan to continue performing remote reviews on some level indefinitely, some sort of hybrid model, if you will, of remote and in-person reviews. During these listening sessions, I was kind of blown away. Jeff and Renee, again, in 2 separate meetings with their organizations, they both demoed their electronic systems for Kendra and I, and some other folks that might have been in those meetings with us. And everyone on my team was just kind of blown away with how well their systems were developed and the process that they went about developing the systems and the stories they have about how and why they created it. So we were so impressed that I reached out to Lorena and asked Lorena, hey, you know, might this be something that might be good for the USAEDC conference in November? Maybe something that might be good platform material for all of the participants to hear about especially those that may be considering developing an electronic system for housing their documentation. And luckily, Lorena agreed. She thought it was a great topic. And thanks to Lorena and her team, they made arrangements to include this panel in the breakout session, obviously, right? So thank you, Lorena. Here we are, and I hope you're ready, because here we go. You're going to see some good stuff. So first, we're going to start hearing from Jeff Rumney. So Jeff is going to talk about the system that he led the development of for the U.S. Dry Pea and Lentil Council. So I remember being very impressed with the story that you shared, Jeff, about how your system was developed and the process that you put in place for the future for any enhancements if needed. So I'm kind of hoping that you take over here. You can advance the next slide, please. And Jeff, please explain specifically. So how and why did you go about developing the system? Maybe explain a little bit about how it works and the documentation that it maintains, and what you see as being some of the benefits of maintaining your documentation electronically. So Jeff,
Absolutely.
if you please take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Vinny. So my name is Jeff Rumney with the USA Dry Pea and Lentil Council. Go ahead, next slide. So a couple of years ago, two brand new members of the USA Dry Pea and Lentil Council, I had moved over to research, and Kara Russell had just started with the organization, sat down and said, how are we going to keep all this stuff organized? And it was kind of lucky. I had a background in software development. I ran an agency for quite a number of years and had a group of programmers, and Kara had come from a database background, and we sat down and brainstormed some ideas. And really what we wanted to do was begin with the end in mind. The goal of this piece of software that we developed, that's called GRIM, was really designed around how to make it most effective and most efficient for our compliance team. So this image is from the last session, our final session with the compliance team, where we went through our reviews, and you can see that everyone is still pretty happy at this point. Next slide. So these were the assumptions that we went into the system with. Enter data once. So when I started in this position, I sat down with the previous admin and looked at her workflow, and I noticed immediately that one piece of data was being entered into our work process many times. So like, say a plane ticket costs $1,512. Well, that would go on an invoice. It would go on an Excel spreadsheet for the budget. It would go on an Excel spreadsheet for a claim, and then our bookkeeper and then CPA would have to enter it again. So I said, none of that. Enter it once and use it multiple times. I also made a commitment to developing a system that involved no email. Email is very unreliable, especially with big files. And I also wanted a system that had no version control issues. When multiple people are working on an Excel spreadsheet, it leads to errors, it leads to confusions. Sometimes the sheet gets corrupted, or you don't know what's going on. And I had experience in developing relational databases, and they're much more powerful than multiple spreadsheets because you can reuse a piece of data for different purposes. You reuse, a line item for a budget, you use it for a claim, you use it for reconciling your QuickBooks. So, and I was really committed to a cloud-based system where we could democratize the workflow. So let's go to the next slide. So what do I mean by democratizing the workflow? So next. So in this system as management, we would come in and enter our grants and our budgets and our activities and all of our rep information. Next. And then throughout the course of the year, our international reps actually log into their little section of the software and enter their invoices, and they can see their activities, their grants, and their work in progress budgets. Then from a grant management perspective, Kara and I work together. We look at the invoices, we create payments, we pay against the invoices, and then we gather up the information to submit claims to UES, and we can also track our industry contributions. So right now we're hand entering the claims into the UES. Next. And then once that check comes from CCC, our accountant can go into the system and backtrack from that check all through the line items and reconcile that payment. And then when the audit team came in next, they would go into the list of claims and they can go right back through the exact same set of data, optimized for them looking at the information. Next. So this is what the system looks like. Grim, on the left-hand side here, you see the list of grants that I go in, and you can see the budget balances and stuff for each grant. And each activity is listed. You can see the budgets, the activity numbers, all that sort of thing. The reps have access just to their individual activities. Next. And this is what an invoice looks like. And on the slide on the left, you can see this was entered by Johanna Stobbs. She had an invoice that had 2 line items on it. One was for MAP, one was for FMD. She uploaded her backup documentation. And then the software repurposes all those invoices, gathers them up. We click on which invoices will go to ATP, and MAP and FMD and whatnot, and make individual claims. So next slide. So when we got ready for the audit, basically all we had to do was find out which claims the audit team needed to look at. It essentially took us 5 minutes to prepare this section, this page for the audit team. So the next slide has a little video on how the audit team would interact with the software. So they would come in and click on a particular claim, and then they encounter the exact same screen that it's not playing. So the audit team would encounter the exact same screen that we entered the invoice on, or this is the claim page, and then they would go ahead and click on that particular invoice. And the invoice screen comes up. You can see all the detail that the rep had entered on this particular invoice. So you can click on the invoice attachment. This is the file that the rep sent us from their software on how they develop their own invoice. We upload that as a general attachment. The audit team can click on the payment background. Here's the wire from Wells Fargo, and then the expense attachment. So here's the activity report that the rep had submitted to the software. So it's all right there. I didn't enter any of this data. It's all entered by the rep. So next slide. So how do you use this information? Basically, go to the next slide. Basically, you can use this information kind of the way we did. I mean, we can, if there's a number of people that are interested in this, we might develop a working group around it. But essentially, we did a search for a low-code database, and we found the software Knack. We searched for a developer that had some accounting background, and then Karen and I sat down and we showed him the spec, and we just slowly developed this piece of software. So my suggestion is ditch the email, burn the paper, and embrace the cloud. Thanks.
All right. So that certainly was a great presentation, Jeff. And I did have a couple of quick questions. So Tim, when I had spoke to him, he communicated that this last review that was done, that it was the most actually the least stressful review that he ever had. He thought that having done the review remotely, utilizing your system, was so beneficial that he could never envision going back to any type of hard copy type of review. Was that also your experience?
Oh, absolutely. Because of the time zone difference, we're on Pacific time zone. The team would meet in the morning, and then the audit team, could work on their own throughout the course of the day without us needing to interact with them. And they would develop, a list of issues that we needed to resolve. And then Karen and I would resolve those in the afternoon, because they had gone home from work already. So the next morning we'd meet again. So there was this just constant advancement towards making progress through the audit. And because it's not, face-to-face, you have time to orient yourself and find the information that you need to find to back up what they're looking for.
Sounds great. And then the last thing, if you could just touch on, maybe you already did, but if you could touch on it again. So what happens if you have updates or you want to make enhancements to the systems? Like, do you have to do that yourself, or what happens?
So we are constantly making updates. We have a software developer. He's a great guy. He's really easy to work with. He understands accounting. He understands the audit process. I love his job because every month he's at a different place. Last month he was in Mexico City. He's just a freelance programmer, and he's really great to work with. So we ask for upgrades, and we're actually integrating our other grants that the council does and our Amex process and other systems and others, other stats programs that we have, he's helping us work on as well.
And how long did the process take, like from start to being operational?
We had a working system within about 4 months from the time we first contacted him. And then I also want to say that Kara and the team actually went back. Our last audit was in 2017. They went back through every transaction that we had done through 2017 and pulled it all together, so that when the audit team hit, they didn't have some paper and some electronic. It was all within the system. Huge amount of work, but it was definitely a benefit.
Oh, that sounds great.
$1,227. That was our issue. $1,227. We double paid Harry Vongini twice, for a plane ticket, and that was basically all we had.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, Jeff. We're going to move on to Renee. So, Renee, I'll be honest, and I hope I don't put you on the spot or embarrass you here, but what I found most impressive is, and if I'm remembering this correctly, you actually developed the system for the American Peanut Council yourself. I think you were not only the person who envisioned it, but the master designer.
Yes,
Is that
but
correct?
it's not as detailed as Jeff's, which was amazing. We basically wanted to keep our system pretty much the same as what the auditors have seen when they come to our office in the past. So we were trying to figure out a way to make it so that they'd be familiar and see exactly what they saw from when they were there in the past.
Please walk us through it.
Okay. So basically, we realized that, I don't think my clicker is working. Oh, there we go. Or maybe that's not me. Anyways, we realized that we were in the dinosaur age, and I believe we may have been the last on-site compliance review, because ours was in February of 20. And in March of 20 is when everybody was shut down and had to go home and work from home. So we realized we were in the dinosaur stage. At our audit, we had asked the auditors if they knew any systems that were, working, that people were using that were electronic, and they were going to get back to us. And then, of course, COVID happened and we were working from home. We knew we had tons of paper that we didn't need to have. We knew we had to pay money for storage for each year. We had to put more boxes in there. We wanted to do something that was environmentally friendly. So next, we got together, the team, and we started brainstorming and decided we were going to come up with a sustainable method. Next. So if you look at the slide on the right, this is a banker's box, and these are our claims. There'd be like 5 or 6 of those that we would put out in our conference room on the table before the auditors got there. To the left, you can see in the background is a banker's box. That is our storage room. And pretty much that whole wall is filled with these banker boxes that, eventually we had to take out and put into storage as we put new ones in after each year was audited. So we knew we had to come up with something. Next. So we looked into a very simple software solution. This is Adobe Acrobat Pro. And here is the process we used. Next. So we receive an invoice from our vendor. It goes to the program manager, who does a payment authorization and approves it, and then sends it to me. I open up the email, and if the invoice or any of the backup is not already in a PDF form, then I change it to a PDF form. I check all the documents for compliance. And once I'm sure everything is good, which we all do, then I will go ahead and make a payment with the bank. Once I make that payment, I save that wire confirmation as a PDF and keep it open on my screen. And then I go into, if you can go back to the next screen, sorry. And then I go into my accounting system and I enter all the accounting information, and then I keep that into a PDF. Now you can go to the next screen. So the second part of the process is where the main part of Adobe comes into play. There's a tab that is called Combine Files. So I have all of these PDFs open on my screen, and we add them by clicking a button that says Combine Files and add all open files. Once they're in this arrangement, we can put them in any way, any order that we would like. And what we've done is we've put it in the order that the auditor has seen when they come in, which was on the previous slide that you guys saw. And we save it as one file. What we do is we name it to go along with what you see on the UES system. So the first part of it will be, the example we have under step 3 is 2114, that's MAP 21, claim 14. Then we put the activity number, the amount, and what the code is. Then after that, we do enter it into an Excel spreadsheet just to show that we are, that everything ties down with the UES system. Next. And this is my final slide. This is what you see when you hop onto our network. You're going to go into our map sum summary, which is you'll see that folder up there. And then once you're in there, depending on the year you want to see, we chose the 21 year. So you go into the 21 map folder. And under that folder, we have some other things, but we clicked on the 21 map electronic claims. And under there, you're going to see a lot of folders like the claim 21-01, -02, -03. We clicked on the 2113 folder for you that's already been reimbursed to show you what an auditor would see. And so in this folder, the very first file you're going to see is the actual reimbursement. When you go into the US system and you do a reimbursement, we print that out to verify that it has been processed and it is pending approval. And then the second file there is our spreadsheet that we use that they can open to see that it does tie down with what the UES website is saying. And then each additional file under that is what was being claimed in this reimbursement. So for instance, that one is a Canadian claim for $33,000 and it went to a contractor code. So we're excited for the auditors to come out to well, they don't actually have to come out, but we're excited for our next review because I think that, it's going to be just like what they've seen. They don't have to spend time sitting in traffic or getting to our office, although we'd love to see them. But we're looking forward to our next review and getting some more feedback from the auditors on what they think about our system.
Well, based on what I've seen so far, I think the feedback's going to be very positive.
Thank you.
Has there been any downside at all, Renee? Like anything that you would say, it's easier to do it the old way? Anything like that?
No, actually, all we see is an upside because, as I said, we left in March, and the team likes to be able to see everything that's going on. And usually you just walk into my office, you open my file cabinet, and there's a claim, and you can see it. But with us not being in the office, they couldn't do that because I had all the papers at home with me until I, created the system, and then I, mentioned to the team, this is what we're going to do, and now all of my coworkers can just come on here, and there's other folders too, like when you go under 21 map and 21 electronic claims that you'll see when the wire was sent. So we don't ask for a reimbursement if we've just paid one thing, and somebody may want to know, hey, did this get paid? And they can go into the wire folder and see that I've wired, the Canadian vendors, the Mexican vendors, or so forth. So it's actually been an upside for us because we're all on the same page and we all can access any of the information anywhere. So it's actually been, a blessing in disguise, I would say.
And how do you handle signatures? Like if any document needed to be signed before it was uploaded into the system or anything like that?
We all have scanners. So some of us have an electronic signature, and we're working on getting everybody that. If not, simply print it out, sign it. So you are using paper if you don't have your electronic signature available, but print it out, sign it, and then scan it back. And then I'll put it back into my system and file it into the proper folders.
Okay, but as things progress and more people get the electronic signature on your team, less need for scanning.
Exactly. It'll be smooth sailing.
Okay, well, that sounds good.
Yep.
So thank you very much. I think that was great.
Thank you.
So now Kendra Young-Strickler, who again works on the FAS compliance team. I think many of you probably know Kendra. I think someone might have a live mic. If you could please mute yourself. So Kendra is our resident expert for market development programs. I'm glad that she's on the team. She saved me many times. So Kendra, actually, she was pretty much the driving force of starting the whole compliance review process for FAS, right? Again, it was came out of necessity, but she not only found, with working with the team, found ways to make it work, but made some adjustments along the way, and it's operating pretty well, obviously, because a lot of people like it and want to keep doing it. So with that, Kendra, you know, just like your slide says, if you could maybe discuss some of the benefits of remote reviews, and if there is maybe an organization that doesn't have an electronic system that we could access, how do we go about sharing documents with them, like making them accessible to us during the remote review electronically? And what type of documentation is it that we are asking for in a review that might be done remotely? So if you would, please take it away, Kendra.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Were you all impressed by the work that the councils completed to make their files electronic? I know I was. Now, are you wondering how CSD would be able to receive these files? Because admittedly, they can be very large at times. Over the next few minutes, I will briefly discuss the benefits of remote reviews, the preferred method to share the documentation, and some of the requested documentation for compliance reviews. Now, please keep in mind, however, that the compliance reviewer assigned to your compliance review will provide further details about the external SharePoint site and the documentation. Now, I'll start with covering the benefits for the remote compliance reviews. For remote reviews, we generally request documentation to be submitted 1 to 2 weeks prior to the start of the review. That allows us to become familiar with the organization of documentation, and we can ask general questions during the entrance conference. Also, we can also start reviewing documentation early if we have time. Another benefit is that we can be more flexible in the sense that we don't have to end our review on the last day as we would if we were to travel on site. And if both parties are available, then we can request an extension if necessary for 1 to 2 business days. Another benefit for flexibility is that we will no longer need to coordinate working hours throughout the day. We will, however, coordinate check-in times for meetings so we can discuss observations that we've had throughout the day. Another benefit that has proven to be beneficial is that we can adjust resources quicker. For example, if a reviewer needs assistance, we will assess the reviewer's responsibilities at the time and see if another reviewer can assist with that review. It has been proven to be beneficial for a remote review. And then finally, there are no travel costs to include hotels, airfare, per diem, or even travel comp hours. So now I'll cover the preferred method for sharing documentation with us. During the pandemic, we worked with IT to create the external SharePoint site. Please note that the guidance will be provided by the reviewer prior to the compliance review. but I'll give you a brief overview of what the instructions for the external SharePoint site. Many of you have already had access to the UES, so you should have an e-authentication account. But generally, most users have level 1 e-auth accounts. For the external SharePoint site, however, you will have to upgrade to level 2. And again, those directions will be provided prior to your review. Once you've upgraded to level 2, you will have to notify the compliance review specialist upon completion. And at that time, the compliance review specialist will reach out to the IT department, and the IT department will grant you access to our SharePoint site. You will receive an email from IT, but when you receive the email from IT, you will not have access to the SharePoint site and to upload documents until 48 hours after that access has been granted. Now, this is our preferred method for sharing documentation with us. However, we can work with IT to ensure your system is accessible should you decide to create a new system. And you can feel free to reach out to us to develop any systems, and we can, again, check with IT for approval. I will now cover some of the requested documentation. Thank you. The remote review documentation is similar to what was requested for on-site reviews, as you can see on the slide. You will note some of the documentation that we request to be submitted 45 days prior to the review, and the remaining documents for remote reviews, we request at least 1 week before the review. We do encourage communication for our process. If there's a need for flexibility, feel free to contact your reviewer or one of us as well. Now, again, the documentation is very similar, such as chart of accounts, the claim summary sheets, a list of contractors paid with program funds totaling the applicable threshold per year, contribution reports for programs and years within the review period. Now, documents required at least 1 week prior to the review includes, but are not limited to, the documentation to fully support the audit trail in transactions related to FAS programs, to include who approved or entered that documentation. And we use that information for elements in a finding, such as the cause or criteria. And we also request the documentation to support contributions, program income, and FAS reimbursed expenses. And note again that electronic files serve as original receipts. And while we're reviewing that documentation, we look at such information as date stamps and consistent fonts to help us ensure that documentation was not altered. We also request the proof of performance, such as pictures of promotional events. We also request bank statements and bid proposals and selection rationale for contracts. Again, please note that the full list of requested documentation will be provided by the compliance review. Thank you for your time, and I will turn it back over to our moderator for the Q&A session.
Okay, so Kendra, let me ask you a question. So I'm a participant. I'm not ready to develop an electronic system. I've got a compliance review this year. I still have all of my files hard copy. So are you telling me that I got to scan all of my files, everything, to get ready for this remote compliance review?
What should happen in that case is the participant should reach out to the compliance reviewer, and the compliance reviewer will be able to select the sample early enough in advance, provide the sample to you so that you can scan the documents related to the sample so that the compliance review can be completed on time as scheduled.
That sounds pretty good. That sounds promising. So the other question I have is, some people like me, I'm not technical savvy at all. Whether even if it's a good, well-developed system, I still kind of fumble around with it sometimes, right? So, this remote review process is brand new to me. I've never done a remote review with your team before. So what should I expect? Am I just going to get some instructions and I'm going to have to figure it out? Or am I going to get some assistance from your team if this is my first remote go?
Absolutely. We are here to assist. We are definitely customer service oriented. So feel free to reach out to us through your compliance reviewer assigned to your compliance review, or you can also contact us through our shared mailbox at FAScompliance at USDA.gov.
That sounds pretty good. So thank you very much, Kendra. Any other thoughts or anything you'd like to add?
One of the other benefits that I truly appreciated for myself is that we were able to remain safe throughout the pandemic, and we did not compromise the participant or our own health throughout the pandemic.
And we never would. So, well, that sounds good. I think that Jeff and Renee, the demonstrations were great. And Kendra, you certainly did a great job with your presentation. I see that we're about 5 minutes over. I think that we caught most of the questions. So I think Jeff and Stephanie kind of answered some of the questions regarding the size of their programs. And certainly there may be some larger programs out there. But,
so Cheryl asked a very, very important question about whether or not electronic is considered valid as an original receipt.
Kendra?
Yes, we have been, that does serve as an original receipt for us.
Thank you.
I think I saw in the chat that Jeff offered up to give a full demo to anybody who may want it. And thank you for doing that, Jeff. If there are some folks that are truly interested in maybe developing a system for themselves, I'd suggest you consider taking him up on his offer. And, I don't know if Renee might be a resource, but I'm sure that she'll be welcome to answering any questions. I see you're nodding ahead. Yes. So reach out to either Jeff or Renee. So I do see a question about the course being developed for software being MAP eligible. And I think I saw an earlier question. So I don't know if I have an answer for that or if we can address that right now. That might be a question that we'll pose to global programs and see if there may be any guidance, but I cannot confirm that. So with that, I think there's one other question for the speakers. Do you miss anything about the earlier systems without the software?
No.
Okay.
No. Capital N, capital O, no.
I agree with Jeff. At first it was hard because I'm a old school, got to have the paper in my hand and got to see it, especially because FAS was always like hard copy, hard copy, hard copy. So at first I was very nervous and very panicked about doing this because I wanted my paper in my hand. But now that it's been several months that I haven't had it, I don't want another piece of paper in my hand at all. So it's definitely a good thing.
I don't think anyone wants to go back, including FAS compliance.
Right.
We're singing a different tune since we started doing these reviews remotely, that's for sure. So, one quick story. So when I met with Jeff and Tim told the story. He said, in the past, we would prepare for compliance reviews. I'd have to go down to my storage facility where I got all these documents stored, and I may not even have to pay for a storage facility anymore. But I would go down, get all the boxes that were needed for the review. Did an intern move a box on me, and now I don't know where it is, and now I'm missing all this documentation. And he kind of spoke to some of the stressors that he had during these hard copy, old-fashioned ways of doing reviews. He said, now everything is in the system. It's all right there. It's all where it should be, and it's accessible at any time. And I believe that one of the benefits that Renee was speaking to was that it doesn't just have to be put into the system at that one location. It could be done from various locations. The system could be accessible remotely, whether it be working from home or working in another state or, maybe another country for that matter. So there are just so many benefits, it's impossible to list them all. I think Jeff just shared his email. I see it in the chat. Again, now we're about 10 minutes over. If anyone has any questions for me and Kendra, you could certainly reach out to us. And with that, I'm going to say thank you all very much. And we're going to close it out. Jeff, Renee,
Thanks,
Kendra,
Vinny. Yep, it was
fantastic.
great. It was fun.
Thank you.
So long, everybody.